what's your take on Chrystia Freeland's strategy to tackle inflation in Canada?
You mean print money and cause more inflation and then say you're fighting inflation? No, it's a horrible idea. The inflation numbers aren't real that the government's giving you. We invented something called the CPI, Consumer Price Index, and its stated goal is to track inflation, and its actual goal is to ignore inflation. Because if inflation numbers get high enough, there are triggers within the US Senate and Congress that it actually has to do something to curb it because it's a real danger. So they created the CPI to mess with the numbers. They never have to track it. So the way the CPI works is it doesn't account for substitutions. It's just a general consumer basket. And the thing is if you go into a grocery store and the average person spends like $100 on groceries. And then, that's what it is in the month of January. But then in the month of February, the average consumer spends, $110 in groceries. So you would say, oh, the CPI has gone up 10%. Inflation is at 10%. But hold on, that's not the exact number. The CPI doesn't account for, again, substitutions. So say, you're a single man or woman, and you just like, protein. You need, and you're just like, all right, I'm gonna buy $100 a week worth of prime steak, beef, whatever it is, just simple good, right? Inflation starts hitting, and the price of that beef goes up by 25%. So you'd have to spend $125 to get the same amount of nutrients you did the previous month. But you can't spend $125. Your budget is, you can maybe spend $110. So you substitute that beef, you are now buying chicken. And the amount of protein in chicken you need to equate the same thing is, okay, you're spending $110 a month. Now, the CPI will say there's 10% inflation here. But the actual inflation numbers are 25% because that's how much the beef went up. And, chicken could have gone up 17%. It's all different ones. But because you are substituting, right? And then if the next month chicken gets more expensive, and you substitute that for, let's say, soybean protein, and that comes down to, you're now only spending $102, but the quality is, so, inflation's now gone down, right? So this is how you get decreasing inflation. People make enough substitutions that you start to see the poor and the middle class go, okay, I've hit my hard budget. I cannot exceed, I was spending $100 a week on groceries, but I literally cannot exceed, $117, right? So you're starting to see as inflation goes down, people start to reach their limits and sort of stay within it. So they'll just start buying less and less and less, or making more and more substitutions, right? And going along. So, inflation is stagnant. We've had inflation at 0% because people who were spending, the only real inflation numbers that you see are the rich people, right? That's the only people where you can actually see real inflation on their stuff, because someone who's super wealthy and, even doesn't need to make substitutions. I'm paying $35 versus $47 for my whatever at Whole Foods. Who cares, right? So their buying habits would stay the same. That's kind of the real inflation number. But most normal people have to make hard choices of what do I want? What do I not want? So this is what the CPIs tend to do. Is once people start to make enough substitutions and the market gets so bad and people hit their caps, we've capped inflation. It stopped growing it's growing at 2.8%, which is the thing. It's no, it's actually at 7%, not 2.8% when you say that, because that's the rate at which prices are increasing. People are just buying less and less things, and people are switching from AAA beef to AA beef or prime grade. They're making substitutions down. So this whole, we're tackling inflation thing, it's no, you're not. Look at mortgage prices, look at interest rates going berserk, look at what are actual people saying? People are saying, it's getting harder and harder and harder to make ends meet, and having to make more and more choices. And people see prices going up and up and up, and then some expert comes on the CBC or whatever news network, CNN, wherever you are, to say, actually, Biden's doing great, Trudeau's doing great, we're curbing inflation by spending money, which increases more inflation. No, you're just using the CPI, a flawed metric, that if applied and used long enough in hyperinflationary terms, there's a point in the CPI when things get bad enough where you actually look at the raw numbers, and if you don't look below them, it actually looks like inflation's going down while it's still rising because people are suffering. So that's my rant on inflation is, right, Chrystia Freeland is still, I'm assuming she has a functioning prefrontal cortex. She knows this. She knows what the CPI is. She knows these measures, but the liberals are essentially just, buying into this failed system, printing more money to give to their supporters or whatever, calling it the act against for diversity of women to save economy, Polyev bad, blah, blah, blah. And then look, it's working because these BS numbers we created are going down. And that's how we lie about inflation to the masses these days.